I used to believe I understood the man I married. If you love stories about betrayal, quiet revenge, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to help us keep bringing you heartfelt stories like this one. Let's dive in. My name is Vivian Whitfield. Before him, I was Vivian Cole. Callum Whitfield didn't always have power. There was a time when he had nothing. No influence, no connections, no seat at any table that mattered. He was just another ambitious man in New York, trying to build something out of nothing. That was before he met my father. My father was Edmund Cole, founder and chairman of Cole and Lindenhall Gallery, a quiet kind of powerful, the kind of man who didn't need attention to change lives. He believed in giving people chances when they had nothing but potential. When Callum's consulting idea was still just a struggling proposal no one believed in, my father gave him access, introduced him to people who mattered, opened doors that would have stayed shut forever. That was the beginning of Callum's rise. I had already lost my mother when I was 19. She died quietly, without warning, and after that, it was just my father and me, and the gallery that had always felt like a second home. So when my father died, years later, I didn't just lose a parent. I lost the last person who had ever fully protected me. And Callum didn't leave my life when my father died. He entered it more deeply. At first, I thought it was loyalty, gratitude, respect for the man who helped him. But over time, I realized it was something else, something more calculated. Because what Callum gained from my father wasn't just opportunity. It was legitimacy, wealth connections, influence, and eventually me. I inherited my father's art gallery after his death. I also inherited his name, his legacy, and the responsibility of preserving everything he built. Callum and I had met years earlier. We married when he was still building his empire, and people said I believed in him too much, that I supported a man who hadn't fully become anything yet. But I thought I was part of his journey. I didn't know I was part of his structure. Because Callum wasn't rising alone. There was someone else beside him, and her name was Patricia Lane. Patricia was a corporate strategist who handled some of Callum's projects, sharp enough that no one questioned why she was always in the room. I didn't think much of her at first. She was simply part of the architecture of his work life, the way certain people become fixtures in a marriage without ever being formally introduced into it. It was only later that I understood how deliberately she had positioned herself there, and how long she had been doing it. Patricia was my husband's mistress. But over time, she became something far more dangerous than that role alone. She formed an alliance with my husband to get me out of the way, so she could take my position permanently. A plan designed around me. At first, I noticed small things in my marriage. Late nights that didn't match my husband's explanations. Phone calls that stopped when I entered a room. Subtle emotional distance that came and went like a controlled rhythm. Then came the tea. Every night, without fail, Callum would prepare chamomile tea. It became a ritual, gentle, predictable, comforting. He would hand me the cup, kiss my forehead, and say the same words. "You work too hard. Drink this. It will help you rest." And I believed him, because trust doesn't always feel like a choice. Sometimes it feels like habit. At first, I only felt tired. Then I started losing time. Evenings disappeared without explanation. I would sit on the sofa reading and wake up hours later in bed with no memory of walking there. Once I found a half-written grocery list in my own handwriting that I had no memory of starting. Another time, I asked Callum the same question twice within an hour, and he answered both times as if it were the first. His patience a little too smooth, a little too rehearsed. My thoughts slowed. My focus faded. My mornings felt like I was stepping into a life that had already continued without me. Still, I told myself it was stress. Life in New York, work pressure, grief I hadn't fully processed. But deep down, something inside me was shifting. Something was wrong, and I couldn't name it yet. The truth began with a simple accident. One evening, while hanging, Callum's jacket, a folded paper, slipped from the inner pocket. I almost ignored it, but my eyes caught the details before I could look away. An address in Midtown, a woman's name, a time. That night, Callum told me he was at a business dinner out of state. But the paper told a different story. I didn't confront him. I didn't react. I simply remembered. Because I was beginning to understand something about powerful men like Callum. They don't fear emotion. They fear evidence. So I stopped reacting and started watching. That was when I began paying closer attention to Patricia as well. Her presence in Callum's world became more visible once I knew how to look. Names mentioned in passing calls, meetings that extended too long, messages that disappeared too quickly. I didn't yet understand the full connection between them, but I could feel it forming. So one night, I decided to find out the truth. When Callum handed me the tea, I held the cup the way I always did and brought it close to my lips. But I didn't let any of it pass them. I just tilted my head back and let my throat move, the same motion as swallowing, so he would see exactly what he expected to see. Then he turned to check his phone, and the second his eyes left me, I tipped the entire cup into the soil of the flower pot beside the sofa, the one my father had given me years ago. I wiped the rim with my sleeve and set the empty cup down on the side table, just as I would have if I'd actually finished it. When he looked up again, I let my eyelids drop. Slow blinks, a loose smile that didn't quite hold. I let my head tip back against the cushion and my words start to slur. "I'm so tired, Callum," trailing off into nothing before the sentence finished. He came and sat beside me, watching my face the way you'd watch a pot to see if it's truly boiling. He lifted my hand and let it fall. It fell the way a sleeping hand falls, because I let it. He said my name once, quietly, almost gently, testing. I gave him nothing. My breathing slowed and deepened on purpose, the rhythm I'd practiced in the mirror nights before, until I no longer had to think about it to get it right. Satisfied, he exhaled. Relief, not concern. Whatever this ritual was for him, it had worked again, exactly as expected. By the time he carried what he thought was my unconscious body, the performance was already finished. All that remained was for him to believe its conclusion. He didn't carry me to our bed. He carried me to the living room sofa instead, arranged a pillow under my head with something close to tenderness, and pulled a throw blanket over me like a man tucking away an inconvenience rather than a wife. Then he stepped back into the bedroom and made a call. I heard his voice through the wall, low and warm in a way it never was with me anymore. "Come quickly, darling," he said. "I want to be with you tonight. I wish you'd taken the earliest flight." Patricia landed sometime after midnight. I heard the front door, heard her heels against the floor, heard the bedroom door close. The room that had been mine for 6 years, with my side of the closet still full, my reading lamp still on the nightstand. I lay on that sofa and I did not move. I held a phone low against my chest, screen dimmed, and let it record what it could from where I was. It felt like the smallest, most undignified kind of evidence to be gathering. It would not feel small later. I heard enough, Patricia's voice rising once, clear and unhurried, somewhere between the bedroom and the hall. I can't wait to have all of this. I can't wait to be by your side forever, so I don't have to sneak in and out like this anymore. Just take her out of the way, my darling. I didn't hear what Callum said back. I only heard him laugh, low and easy, the way he used to laugh with me. I lay there until almost 6 in the morning, listening to a life that was supposed to be mine carry on without me in the next room. At some point, I stopped being able to hold it in, and I wept quietly, my hand pressed hard over my own mouth, careful, even in my grief, not to make a sound that might give me away. I had become a woman who had to hide her own tears in her own home. By 6, Patricia was gone, slipped out the way she'd slipped in. By 7, Callum was in the kitchen making coffee, humming something tuneless, asking if I'd slept well. He looked at me the way he always did. Nothing in his face admitted to anything. Whatever he was thorough about it. I told him I'd slept like the dead. He smiled and said that was good, that I needed the rest. I understood, that morning, why he hadn't simply found a way to be rid of me outright. There was a clause in our marriage that made my removal worthless to him, unless it looked like illness, like collapse, like my own mind giving way on its own. A wife declared unfit was a fortune. A wife who simply disappeared was a murder investigation. So the tea wasn't an end in itself. It was the slow construction of a story, one where I lost myself gradually, convincingly, with no one to blame but my own deteriorating mind. That was the night I understood the shape of what I was up against. Not a husband and his mistress. An engineered story, told one quiet dose at a time. The night everything changed again was ordinary in appearance. Same apartment, same city lights through glass walls, same calm routine. Callum brought me the tea. I accepted it as always, but this time I didn't drink it. When he left the room, I poured the tea carefully into a second mug and left the original untouched. Then I sat down and waited. Minutes passed. Then I heard his voice from the study, low, controlled, precise. "She's stable under the dosage," he said. A pause. Then another voice. "Patricia, calm, certain. That's good. She trusts you completely. That's what matters." Callum continued. "She won't remember enough to challenge anything when it begins." Silence followed, and in that silence, something inside me broke open, not emotionally, structurally, because now I understood. This was not confusion, not illness, not stress. It was a system, a plan. I was not living inside a marriage. I was living inside an operation. The next morning, I did not cry. I did not confront him. I did not reveal anything. Instead, I began documenting everything. I contacted Dr. Sarah Chambers, a toxicologist I once knew from university. I met her quietly, away from familiar spaces, and gave her a sample of what I had collected from the cup. Days later, she called me back, her voice careful. "What you've been exposed to is a sedative compound," she said. "Something designed to work slowly, in small doses, so it builds without announcing itself. Repeated exposure affects memory formation. It can create confusion, gaps, disorientation." Then she paused. "How long has this been happening?" I looked out the window when she asked. "I don't know," I said. And that was the most terrifying part, because I truly didn't. Her final words stayed with me. "It is enough to make you doubt your own mind." That was when I stopped being uncertain, because doubt was exactly what they were building. Callum and Patricia were not just harming me. They were reshaping my reality so I would no longer be credible in my own life. And I understood the second layer. A prenuptial agreement I had signed years earlier contained a clause I once overlooked, buried in language dense enough that I'd trusted the lawyers and never read it twice. If I were declared mentally unfit, all control of shared assets would transfer to Callum. My gallery, my inheritance, my father's legacy, everything my father had spent a lifetime building, passed into the hands of the one person who had only ever circled it, waiting. It wasn't spontaneous. It was structured. Someone had read that clause years before I ever thought to, and had been building toward it ever since. And Patricia's role became clear. She was not just a lover. She was the second pillar of the plan, the witness who would help confirm the story they were building about my instability, the voice that would validate the illusion. So I stopped being visible in my reactions and became precise in my actions. Every night I pretended to drink the tea. Every night I recorded what I could hear. Every conversation, every call, every detail became evidence. While they believed I was disappearing, I was building the moment they would collapse. The night I chose to end it was simple. I made the tea myself. Callum drank it without suspicion. Patricia was not physically there, but her presence was in everything he said, everything he believed he controlled. He spoke about future plans, expansion, travel, a life he thought still belonged to him. Then his voice slowed, his body followed, and silence took him, not unconscious in a dramatic way, but controlled, complete. I picked up my phone. "It's time," I said. 40 minutes later, lawyers arrived, a process server, a private investigator, and Margaret Walsh, a woman known for dismantling carefully constructed legal schemes. Callum woke up to documents instead of power, to evidence instead of denial, to consequences instead of control. The trial was not chaotic, it was methodical. His recordings played in court, his voice, Patricia's voice, their planning exposed without distortion. The footage I had gathered that first night on the sofa, Patricia's voice asking him to take me out of the way, his laughter in response, was the piece that made the jury's faces change. Financial trails confirmed, intent made visible. Patricia tried to step away from him when the pressure increased, choosing survival over loyalty. She testified against Callum, hoping cooperation would soften what was coming for her. It didn't work. Callum was found guilty on charges of drugging, fraud, and conspiracy, sentenced to 18 years in a federal correctional facility. Patricia was convicted as a co-conspirator. Her cooperation reduced her exposure, but not enough to save her. She was sentenced to 7 years, stripped of her license to practice as a strategist, and ordered to pay restitution alongside Callum. When the sentence was read, Callum finally looked at me, not with anger, not with denial, but with realization, because he understood something in that moment. I had never been asleep. After everything, I left the penthouse. I left the glass walls and silence an illusion of control. I returned to Brooklyn and reopened my father's gallery fully, Cole and Lindenhall, exactly as Edmund Cole had built it, with his name restored to the door in gold letters. I created a fellowship for young artists who had nothing but talent and time. People like I once was, before all of this began. I named it after my father, and within a year, the first fellows were already exhibiting their work on the same walls he once walked. Callum lost everything he tried to take from me. Patricia disappeared from that world entirely. But I did not build my life around their downfall. because that was never the point. 3 years later, the gallery was thriving beyond anything my father had imagined. The fellowship had grown into a foundation, and I had grown into a woman who no longer flinched at the sound of a kettle, or a closing door, or a man's calm voice in another room. I had rebuilt, not out of revenge, but out of what was always mine to begin with. One morning, I sat in my kitchen with a simple cup of chamomile tea. No fear, no suspicion, no one watching, just peace. And for the first time in a very long time, I drank it completely. If this story moved you, drop a comment and tell me what you'd have done in Vivian's place. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep telling stories like this one. Thanks for watching.